Hello again, everybody. This is Robert Brighton. Welcome back to All That Glitters, and this is the third installment of our true crime investigation into the murder of little Marian Murphy in 1902 Buffalo. Where we left off, the body of little Marian has been found in a pond in Forest Lawn Cemetery. She has been violated, she has been murdered, strangled, and she is wrapped in a kind of heavy gauze. Her body is wrapped in a kind of heavy gauze. She's naked except for a pair of underwear, or like well, not underwear. It would be called a chemise. It was a undershirt kind of thing, a long undershirt, but she doesn't have anything else on. She's been wrapped in this sort of gauze, and then she's been tied with a heavy jute cord, and there's some old newspapers that have been wrapped around the body and more cord. So it was like a bundle. It actually looked like the way people wrapped laundry in those days. Now remember, Marian's very small. She was only less than 4 feet tall and only about 35 or 40 pounds. And so someone had, basically bundled her up and wrapped her in this. And she ended up looking like a parcel because this dead child was likely transported several miles to the north of Buffalo from the area where she was abducted. So how would somebody get a dead body, several miles, up the road? The thought was the body was wrapped up to look like a parcel or a bundle of laundry, especially. That's the way laundry was put together in those days. Okay, so the cops start thinking, well, who's to blame for all this? And they're thinking, well, she looks like a bundle of laundry. How about somebody who runs a laundry? Well, okay, I guess that's one way to look at it. But in any event, the person they pick is a Chinese fellow by the name of Charlie Wee. He's an American citizen, an immigrant from China, which was very rare because you have to remember this is in the middle of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which went on until the 1940s. I mean, there was no Chinese immigration allowed into the United States. So those few Chinese who lived in the United States had either lived here for a long time or had some other special dispensation. So Charlie Wee was an American of Chinese ancestry. But he happened to be of Chinese ancestry, which he stuck out like a sore thumb at this time because you got to remember, Buffalo in 1902 had a population of about 357,000 people in the city, which incidentally is more than 50% more than its population today, just as a side note. But it had about 357,000 people in the city at that time. And guess how many of them were Chinese? This is according to U.S. Census data, by the way. I'm not making this stuff up. The answer is 96. So it takes some doing to find a Chinese culprit, among this vast sea of other possibilities. But the cops did that. And, unfortunately, Chinese people were, at the time, in the late Gilded Age, for a whole lot of reasons. They were thought of as, potentially criminal or shifty. They tended to stay together in their own communities, and people were a little suspicious about that, and they spoke their own language and all that. Well, people make up in their minds what they want to, and so people thought Chinese people were probably good suspects for this sort of thing. So they bring old Charlie Wee into the police headquarters and interrogate him. They don't charge him with anything. They search his place, they turn it all upside down, and they find cloth there, of all things. Wow, we found cloth at a laundryman's place, okay, get it. Unfortunately, not the kind of cloth that Marian's wrapped in. Marian's wrapped in a kind of a heavy gauze, and she's tied in a certain type of twine, and there's one person in the neighborhood from which she was abducted that says when they see in those days, you could go visit bodies at the morgue. So a lot of people went, just curiosity, And when they see the cloth that she's wrapped in and they see the cord that she's wrapped in, this person says, you know what? That's standard stuff paper hangers have in their kit. That's paper hangers canvas. That's a paper hanger's twine. That's what they tie their bundles of wallpaper up before they put them up. You have to remember at this time, wallpaper was a terrific way to decorate your house because walls were kind of uneven. All right. Sometimes they were plaster, sometimes they were board, so you could put the paper over, and it looks nice and smooth and it's pretty. And it was and the late Victorian age, they loved colors and flowers and all that sort of stuff. So you could get a really fancy look in your house with wallpaper. So wallpapering was a huge thing then. And there were a lot of people who were paper hangers. Well, anyway, someone notices the similarity between this cloth and this twine to the paper hangers trade. Very, very interesting. But the cops don't do anything with that because they've got their man. They've got Charlie Wee. And Charlie Wee runs a laundry and he's Chinese and, all this other stuff. Well, the problem with it is there's no they even dug through his sewer, looking for if he'd flushed anything. Charlie Wee had nothing to do with this girl's kidnapping and murder. He had nothing to do with it. He just had the misfortune of being Chinese, really, and living in the neighborhood. So, having said that, the cops kind of doubled down on him. They just decided they're going to keep him in jail without charges, and they did. They kept this guy in jail for about 3 months before a grand jury was convened. As the 3 months pass, two things happen. One is a lot of people in Buffalo start to feel really sorry for Charlie Wee. I mean, they know this guy isn't guilty of anything other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or being the wrong person at the wrong time, whatever. They know he's not guilty of anything, and so public sentiment shifts against the cops and shifts against the courts, and free Charlie Wee becomes a thing and all this. And he gets some legal representation that's pretty good, and the cops finally have to admit that they have no basis to hold Charlie Wee. The grand jury convenes, they don't return an indictment, Charlie Wee is free to go. Now, a couple things have happened. One is in this intervening time when Charlie Wee's been sitting cooling his heels in the police dungeon, his business has been destroyed, of course. Nobody's going back to him because even if he's been sprung for this, people still think, there's something not quite right. So his business has been destroyed. And the other thing that's even worse than destroying the man's business is they basically wasted the officials and the cops have wasted 3 months, thinking they've got this guy and not looking for anybody else. Well, they don't have the guy, and they haven't really done anything else to find the other people. They've questioned a lot of people, but they haven't done anything. So the investigation is, shall we say, botched from the start. And, even today, if this is true, I mean, I hear this on CSI or something like that, like the first 24 hours after a crime are the most important, and that probably makes sense, right? Because the trail does get cold, and especially in those days without forensics, and they didn't even use fingerprints widely. There were fingerprints, but not the way we have them now. You couldn't recover them from a soggy, wet body or newspaper or anything like that. They didn't have DNA, they didn't have any of that stuff. So, I can be a little sympathetic to the cops for botching it. I can't be terribly sympathetic to them for, picking a guy that they thought they could hang it on and then finding out much later that they couldn't, and now they're caught flat-footed. That doesn't feel too good to me. But anyway, it was actually that convinced me that I wanted to solve this case. Because I felt that while the trail is a lot colder now after 125 years, in some ways we can drop into it in a very different way than the people who were looking into the crime at the time. We have vast resources at our fingertips through this magical thing called the internet, which I use to do a lot of my research. And I don't believe everything I see on the internet. I'll tell you about a couple of examples, but I will tell you that in the next installment, I'm going to share with you the person I think killed young Marian Murphy.